Thank you for joining me for another Quick Hits conversation. I'm Dr. Robyn, aka Mental MacGyver. I provide concierge, high-performance support and coaching to executives, founders, celebrities, and athletes. With me today, I have Kevin Wash. He is a coach, mentor, author, trainer, and speaker, running a consultancy business specializing in sales for international property development. I have Elissa Hecker. She is the go-to general counsel, collaborative partner, and creative problem solver for business and the arts and entertainment industries. I have Dan Redman. He is a CEO who ran into rough waters. He now increases the likelihood of success for small businesses by 50% or more. The question I have for you, what is the difference between communication and propaganda? Kevin, what do you think?
I think if you had to sum it up in one word, it would be honesty. So for me, the way that I would describe propaganda is generally hype and it's designed to influence people to do whatever. Whereas communication should be open and it should be honest. I think the two of them can work together as a partnership and it can work very well and it can equally can work very badly. So for example, if a company promotes the propaganda, they're going to achieve $10 billion in sales, but they have absolutely nothing behind it, then it's going to become an out and out failure. If a company says we're going to achieve $10 billion in sales and they communicate honestly to their team, this is the time frame, this is the strategy, this is the budget, this is how we're going to achieve it. And every step that we take towards it will be seen as a success, then it can work really well. So I think honesty, and if it goes together, propaganda can really help to drive business for companies.
I agree on the honesty part. I think propaganda also usually includes a scapegoat. And the we are stronger than and the you are weaker than moment, or not moment, but point. So I think although propaganda and communication can work well together, I think there's always something surreptitious in the propaganda where there's definitely going to be negative connotation. We are stronger than, we are better than, at the expense of others.
Just to kind of tag onto that as well, I think what you're leaning into a little bit as well, Elissa, is like looking for the emotion in it. And I think that that's almost like a tip of the cap. When you're reading something, you can learn the intention a little bit more if you understand the emotion behind it. And I think that that's where you see a lot of those fear-based communication threads. Those are all laden with rich and deep and pain-pointy emotion. And I think that that's a little bit of a tip-off. I hear and see some like seeding of disinformation around things that have educational intent. And to me, that's confusing. Well, if the intent is educational, how can you also spin this around and say that it's propaganda? The intent is misplaced, in my opinion.
And I heard Kevin say truth, and the first thing I thought was truth from whose side? Because I feel like propaganda has it, like you said, Elissa, this kind of our side, their side kind of thing. And so it might be true from my side, but not true from someone else's point of view.
Yeah. I think that for me, you can use propaganda. It's not necessarily about being bigger or better than other people. It's to promote your own brand. So if I give you an example, there's two well-known American movie actors who have purchased a football club in England and they're in the lower leagues. The propaganda that they're spinning is their intention is to get up into the Premier League of England. They've already won the first promotion. But the message that's going behind it is, all we want to do is get there. If it takes us 10 or 15 years, that's great. They're not saying we're going to become the biggest club in the world. They have a goal for their club. The propaganda, the hype is actually making them now. They've got a fan base in America. I think most of the people don't even know where this plays. Most people in England don't know where this club plays from. So the propaganda has gone very well because there's honest communication that's come alongside it. That's what I'm talking about.
Propaganda, though, is usually, I still think it's a negative connotation. I think you use the right word, hype. And branding. And I think it's almost also manifesting. If you brand correctly and you have a good strategy, like a good marketing strategy, then it can become, you get your money, you get your branding, you have your followers, they're bringing up the reputation of the United States. But I'm still not sure that's propaganda. I usually think of Soviet Russia, Nazi Germany, what went on here in the 1920s and 30s. It's a little bit different. I may also be thinking totally politically. But I think marketing and propaganda are two very different things.
I guess that beckons the question too, is propaganda bad? And I think that we could point to some instances and speaking politically and say, yeah, that's bad. It's bad to make a group of people think things that aren't true or that have ill intention. But is propaganda good? There's definitely some ways that you'd say, yeah, fueling a hype machine for positive nature or to excite a group of people or to elicit joy or to stimulate a rivalry. Maybe you can even say that like between universities could be like positively, in a way, positively leveraging propaganda. So I think that like it's definitely like slippery and there's probably a lot of gray, but I wouldn't say that propaganda is wholly categorically wrong.
I do feel like I agree with you, Elissa. There's a negative connotation for it for me, but I'm not sure if that's because everything I've read about it is from history and dropping leaflets from airplanes and stuff like that. Like, am I using the word incorrectly? Is there a positive effect to it? The hype, the excitement, and then back to the original question, what makes that different than just communication?
I think I understand what you're saying about propaganda and your points historically. Yeah, they're correct. There was propaganda had very negative connotations. I'm talking about it from a business perspective or even from a personal perspective. And I think probably I am moving more from propaganda towards hype. I'm kind of linking those two words together. So I think propaganda can have very negative connotations. Politically, generally, it is all negative because it's generally all complete BS. We know that. But if I want to develop my brand and nobody knows who I am, if I can come up with some wonderful scheme of propaganda to get people to look at me, is that a bad thing? I don't necessarily think that is a bad thing.
No, I think it's the why, it's the how, and I don't know if propaganda and propagate come from the same derivation, but you want to propagate it so people want to be part of it.
So are they the same thing and we're just, the word propaganda has been linked negatively?
No, I don't think they're the same thing. I think communication is, if you think about it, propaganda is I'm putting a message out to everybody. And I'm really not even sure who's going to listen to it, who's going to see it, who's going to hear it. But if I'm going to communicate, for me, communication is something that should be done openly and honestly. And I should know who my audience is. So I would be tailoring what I'm saying and I would be making sure it's factual, it's relevant, it's realistic, it's time related. That for me is the difference.
Yeah.
I would say that propaganda is a sophisticated method of communication.
Say more about that. How sophisticated, in what way?
That it varies desired outcomes where communication does not necessarily, as a broad term.
Going back to the emotional aspect where communication is, I have a book out, here's what it's about. And where propaganda is, this is an amazing book, look at how great it is. Is that the difference, the emotional spin?
Yeah, you're operating on a different plane, and that adds to the sophistication level to be able to leverage propaganda in either positive or negative capacities.
And propaganda is also telling a story in a certain way where communication may not be.
I think take your example you just used there, Robyn. If you've got a book and you're saying, I've got a new book out, I've done this, I've done that, you're communicating it. If I'm going to be responsible for selling it, I'm going to use propaganda and hype the hell out of this book. That's coming from me. I'm going to be telling people, look at Dr. Robyn's new book, read it. It will touch you, it will do this. Whereas you're going to be telling it from a more honest perspective. You're communicating what you've written and why.
So communication is facts and propaganda is emotions?
Embellish.
I really like Kevin's hype.
Yeah, hype's a good word. I do think it's interesting that we've kind of come to the conclusion that propaganda isn't necessarily negative, that it could be okay.
It depends how you use it. It's like all things. You can make it negative, you can make it positive, you can make it emotional, you can make it complete BS. Whether it's good or bad is in the hands of the person using it.
I go back to, we were talking about entertainment earlier, but like NCIS or all of those shows, I just always refer to them as propaganda shows. I love them. I think they're great entertainment, but they're basically propaganda for what the US military does or the CIA or something like that.
I'm slightly hesitant to use this example. I think back to post 9/11 and how propaganda was used to unite American citizens in a lot of ways. There was another aspect. There was a military sort of fuel up, but also there was more of like, we need to connect. But there were some pieces there that was more like, we're all New Yorkers today. And I think that was positive propaganda.
Okay. Well, that is a good place to end this 10-minute communication. Thank you so much for doing this with me, and I look forward to speaking to each of you again very soon.